joined by Chronic Hoosier. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. In addition to having a pork butt on the smoker, I just stopped for a second and realized we're back to being undefeated again right now. Everybody is. It's a new day. Uh, the new season starts now. Honestly, off season is here, and at least on the IU basketball side, not exactly sure what that's going to look like yet, but we've had a little bit of movement since we last spoke, and probably likely to see some more here in the coming days. So exciting times in B Town, man.
Yeah, Chris Ledlam has a visit scheduled, I believe. The guy from Harvard, and you heard Mike DeCourcy on right before, and he said something that is the most important of all. These guys have to have chemistry. They have to play together to win. I saw that with the Miami team. You saw that with the UConn team, the FAU team, San Diego State. These teams that went far, every one of those teams had transfers on it. But man, oh man, they look like they've been playing. Miami looked like they've been playing together for 2 years.
Yeah, I think Mike was spot on with that, and I've been saying it, forever. There's a reason that John Calipari doesn't win a title every year. Doesn't get to the Final Four every year.
You mean besides you can't coach?
Well, in spite of having some of the top talent in the country year after year after year after year, it generally is going to come down to chemistry. It's everything in college basketball, especially single elimination tournament play. And it's just extraordinarily difficult to get the mix right when you're constantly having to replace so many pieces. And, as we discussed last week and previously, there has been no greater time in the history of college basketball to do what IU is trying to do this year, in as much as replacing, so many key players on the roster than in the portal era that we now find ourselves in. But at the same time, the peril that exists is exactly what I was referencing with Calipari. You're seeing it now with Duke and a lot of the other blue bloods that are just consistently raking in 5 stars and top recruits. It's really tough to get the chemistry right. And when you're mixing in so many new ingredients so frequently, there's just so much that can go wrong. So little margin for error there in getting it right. Not the least of which is, you're bringing in a bunch of young guys and competing against, quite honestly, some grown men. So, it's going to be one of those things that you really have to, you've got to have a touch. You've got to have your finger on the pulse of your locker room, of your program's culture, and find not just the best athletes or basketball players, but the best fits for your program and the roles that you're going to ask those guys to step into, or else you're going to continue to struggle with this. But ton of opportunity, ton of risk, and tons of questions yet to be answered as far as what it's going to look like. But certainly no shortage of challenges for Mike Woodson and his staff in trying to construct the roster for next season.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Another thing that I asked Mike about. We know what they have -3. Having just brought in Peyton Sparks from Ball State, and how do you feel about poaching from cannibalizing your own, taken from Michael Lewis?
Hey, that's the pecking order of things, man. It's kill or be killed.
I'm glad he left first, but it sucks when you lose a player like that. No matter what, if you're Michael, it just sucks. And then to have him go to Indiana, I don't know if that matters anymore or not. I mean, maybe you feel better about it because that's your school. That's where, if you're happy for him, I don't know. Michael's too damn competitive. I doubt it. He wants to win.
I'll tell you what, I can't remember where I saw it. I'm gonna have to look it up here real quick. Somebody attributed a quote to Mike Lewis last week, basically saying something to the effect that he talked to him about what it meant to come to IU, that he was joining a brotherhood, acknowledging that this was his childhood team. This is who he grew up rooting for. So it would be really difficult for anybody, not to mention an Indiana born and bred guy who is an Indiana alum, we got to play in the national title game. To see one of your players have that opportunity and deny him, I just thought it was extraordinarily classy of Mike Lewis to give those words of encouragement, in spite of the fact that he's getting his roster cherry picked here. But kudos to him for taking it well, and kudos to Sparks for being able to actualize one of those dreams. And for a lot of guys, you know. Those opportunities are going to be there now, and it's not unlike the general student body. I know a lot of folks who didn't get into IU Bloomington as their first choice when they were coming out of high school, and whether they go to one of the satellite campuses or somewhere else, that are able to come over after a year or two once there's some openings in the enrollment system. Kudos to those folks that are able to make that dream happen, because Lord knows I was fortunate enough to get to do it, as well as my brother and just like my father did, and an experience that changed all of our lives for the better, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. So, that's the thing though, is you've got to find guys who want to be here, that live in their dream, not just the mercenaries, if you will, who are chasing the NIL paychecks and chasing that clout, which is certainly going to be part of it. You get guys at this level, they have aspirations well beyond NCAA basketball. And, as a basketball program, it's their job to get them ready and prepared. And, one thing Mike Woodson has in his bag this offseason that wasn't necessarily there last year, he's now going to be able to point to a couple of guys who were able to make that leap, who were able to improve themselves and their draft stock, and go on to play professional basketball in the NBA, as well as some other guys who are probably going to have some other professional opportunities abroad. So that's the key component when you're trying to attract that caliber of talent, is having demonstrable proof that you can get them where they're trying to go, that you can help facilitate those dreams. And you heard Jalen Hood-Schifino in the wake of his announcement that he was declaring for the draft, saying that the staff kept their word to him. They trusted him unequivocally. They believed in him, and they got him where he was trying to go when he chose Indiana to come play college basketball. So, heck of an endorsement, and hopefully, give a little bit of tailwind and some momentum to this staff as they try to reload for next season.
Yeah, they in talking about it, I know. Let me first say, I'm not a coach, and I'm not a scout, but I can easily look and see what Indiana needs to add to what they have, and that is shooting. We talked about that with Mike. They have got to have a couple of knockdown shooters. There's without question, and they have 3 spots to fill. 2 of those have to be wing type players. I don't know what that third player is going to be. I don't think Caleb Love is what Indiana really needs, but again, that's not my decision. I don't know. You hear a lot about him, but I don't like to go by what you hear. But there is a lot of smoke out there with him. Indiana doesn't need smoke. They don't need anything. They don't even need an ember. They need everything to be cold and cool. I'm just not sure that Caleb Love is what this team needs from a position wise either.
Well, let me go back a step. The board I'm looking at, we've got 4 open scholarships now with Hood-Schifino gone, and Sparks addition. With Cups and Newton coming in, you've got Renew, Banks, Gunn.
That's true. That's true. My bad. You're right. You're right.
Galloway, Sparks, and Leal are going to be the COVID juniors, technically seniors by class, but eligibility wise, still 2 years remaining after this. And assuming X gets back or gets his waiver, that's still 4 spots you got to fill. And I think, in a perfect world, you probably distribute those fairly evenly across the floor. It certainly wouldn't hurt to have another big to back up Renew. Although, I expect Indiana to get a little bit further removed from that post-driven bully ball. You never have enough guards, and as you mentioned, you never have enough shooters. But when you look at the tournament and the way a lot of these matchups shook out, I would also argue that some athletic wings, guys that have multi tools in their bag, are going to be extraordinarily valuable going forward in the style of play that Woodson's indicated he's trying to move to, kind of this positionless basketball. There is a premium in this game for length, athleticism, and speed. And above all else, you got to be able to put the ball in the cylinder. So It's going to be fascinating to see how they decide to spread those openings out, assuming that they're going to fill them all. And it also raises the old issue that's been retired for a couple years. The value of oversigning classes. Scholarships are gold. You've got to manage them like they're your future. That's your nest egg. But in this age, now you find yourself in a position where it's April and you got 4 openings on your roster for some critical spots that you got to fill. So the portal certainly gives you a plethora of options there. But it's a double-edged sword, as we mentioned with the chemistry. But there's no doubt Indiana has a lot of needs on its shopping list that it's looking to fill here. So it'll be interesting to see how the staff chooses to fill them and what that kind of points towards as far as what type of style of play we can expect to see from Indiana next year.
Yeah, I kind of mind blown that extra. I don't know what I was thinking, who I was thinking had filled that, but with that correction, yeah, now no, a guard, a big, and 2 wings. And with the talent that is out there and the talent that Indiana has, Indiana could be a contender for the Big Ten title again next year, because the one thing I told Mike this, and I'll say it 1,000 times again, the one thing I've learned from last year is none of us know jack about who's going to be good because these teams are so different. And they gel together differently now because they're so different. So we don't know how good anyone in the Big Ten is going to be. Purdue is listed, as a not too early number 2 or 3 in the country, of course, because they're going to have the same roster back. And that's the same team that's beatable in the same way to me. But Indiana has an opportunity to completely reinvent itself. They're in a unique position where they are going to, I think, completely reinvent the identity on the court.
I think they're going to have to after the last 2 seasons with Woody having Trace at his disposal. That was very clearly the way that Indiana was going to play. It was almost exclusively through the post. And that was just a product of the ingredients that were left in the kitchen from the prior regime. So now we find ourselves at a point where, the majority of the roster, all but just a couple of players, in as much as Galloway and Leal are really the only guys left over from Archie Miller's staff that he brought in. So you're going to be looking for the first time at a roster that's almost exclusively selected by this staff. So it's their chance to put their mark on the program, not just with the players they're bringing in, but the style of play and the culture. And that's one of those things that we saw, over the course of the Tom Crean era, especially after 13, just the perils of having to replace a lot of bodies, but having to try to retain some semblance of your program's identity, of the culture that you're trying to establish. And usually that's a product of leadership on the floor. And that's certainly one of the big risks going forward, is you've got to find not only those positions, those roster spots, but you've got to find guys that are going to be able to advance the progress of this program building that the staff's undergoing right now, because there's just so many balls up in the air and so many pieces moving around on the table. It can be real easy to miss the mark. And you look at like the 17 Hoosiers. That was a team that had Thomas Bryant, OG, Juwan Morgan, James Blackman, Robert Johnson. You had a ton of talent on that team, professional talent, NBA talent. And, without the right mix, without the right leadership, you find yourselves giving away a home opportunity or an opportunity to host a home NIT game and getting your doors blown off in Georgia Tech. So it's not always about talent. It's about having the right guys in the right spot in the right combinations. So lots of risk, lots of reward going forward for Indiana as it enters the portal here.
Yeah, I was just thinking that there are it's almost, this next season will be almost just like a fresh spring breeze of new, an infusion of fresh energy, because, and I'm not Trace Jackson Davis, blaming him in any way, but I'm just saying the Trace Jackson Davis era was such a shadow. It was so big. Well, now that's gone, and it's a new era. That's kind of the Archie era, kind of going out. I know it's not completely gone with a couple of guys left on the team, but for the most part, that was the Archie era, kind of gone now. And you're going to have a lot of new faces that can bring in a lot of fresh energy. People like Peyton Sparks, who grew up, like you said, he dreamed of playing at IU. Well, he's going to get that opportunity. So when you're allowed to live out your dream, I'm going to imagine you're going to be pretty happy. And as the energy I've already seen that he displays when he's playing on the floor, which is playing like a madman, I can only imagine what it's going to be like to see him when he's wearing an Indiana jersey doing that.
No doubt. And that's, that's one of the things that Indiana fans have certainly embraced over the years. And it's one of those things that gets really gray, you probably don't have Trace Jackson Davis at Indiana, but for the fact that he grew up in Greenwood, no differently than the Romeo's probably even a little thornier issue. But each one of those guys who chose to put on the candy stripes, they make it that much easier for the next guy to commit to IU, who has similar dreams, who comes up from a similar upbringing, if you will. All that said, I have zero problem right now with this staff going wherever the best talent may be. Again, not just talent, but the best fit may be. And that's certainly something that Mike Woodson emphasized early on. And I think he will probably continue to till he's done coaching here, is the importance of these guys understanding what it means to play at Indiana. But make no mistake, that's not something that's solely determined by what city is listed on your birth certificate. And I'd point to Gabe Cupps as a prime example. I mean, he's one of those guys that I have a feeling is going to be the embodiment of a Hoosier, no differently than Grace Berger was, quite honestly. Somebody that just puts in the work, that shares in their teammates' success, that helps facilitate other success, and enjoys the accolades for themselves along the way. But a great example of what it takes from a roster building standpoint to get that mix right. And at the end of the day, you got to have guys that want to be here, that want the best, not just for themselves, but for the university, and most importantly for their teammates. And that's quite honestly what leadership looks like. That sacrifice. And you could do an entire case study on what Terry Morin has done on the south end of Cook Hall to really establish and grow and let that flourish within her program. But that's certainly the challenge Mike Woodson's going to be tasked with going forward, is finding those guys, because this is going to be a bellwether year for Indiana, at least in the Mike Woodson era. Now that he has such an impact on what the program is going to look like going forward from a player standpoint, you got to get it right, because as we've seen in years past, Indiana fans will give you they'll give you some grace over the first couple of years. But with each passing year and each season's tally that you're posting, the hill gets a little bit steeper if you're not advancing, if you're not progressing. So there's certainly an opportunity. There's a pitfall, if you're not careful, that you lose all the momentum of the last two seasons. And we said that last year, but that was returning a ton of talent, returning a ton of players from the prior season. So now you get to start over again with almost half of your scholarships being brand new to Indiana. So monumental task ahead, but monumental opportunities on the other side if they get it right.